I've been playing a ton of Boltgun. As soon as I heard that there was a Warhammer inspired Doom style game coming out, I was sold. It combines two things that I really enjoy: video games and Warhammer. As I'm playing this game, I'm really enjoying it. But then I figured, why not bring in my third favorite thing, painting? But I don't want to stop at just a single model. What I really want to do here is go for a full mini diorama. In order to pull this off, I'm going to dive deep into the Spitz box. I've probably got stuff that's about 20 years old sitting in here. Even with all those bits laying around, I still couldn't find the perfect legs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this skull right off the pistol, and then I'll glue it directly onto the kneecap. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Or some other cheesy tagline. I don't know how many of you out there have had the pleasure of working with these old kits. It was a lot of fun, they're really flexible, and you had a lot of freedom in how you posed these old Marines. For Malum's chainsword arm, I'm going to go ahead and hack this power sword right in half, and I'm going to use that hand and then add a chainsword on top of it. Again, even this wonderful bits box didn't have what I needed, so I needed to improvise a little bit. I promise, buddy, it's going to a good home. And after I've got this belt scraped flat, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue on there, and then put the emblem smack dab in the middle. One of the recent tools I picked up from my hobby kit is this great rotary tool. It's cordless, and it makes things so much faster. Drilling and pinning, not a problem. The basic concept here is really simple. I'm just going to make a hole inside the hand, make one inside the sword, and then I'm going to use a little bit of metal wire from a paper clip to give this connection that little bit of extra strength and that little bit of staying power. This is the first chance I've had to see them come together, and it is really looking good. After that, it's all about the loincloth and purity seals. Tons and tons of purity seals. So many oaths. The next problem I'm running into is I know what shoulder pad I want, but this guy's already got it. So we're going to pull some tau and something for the greater good. Unfortunately, when I broke this thing off, the arm did not come off clean, and I wound up using a scalpel, moved away from that, because that seemed a bit dangerous. The clippers didn't seem to do the job, so I got out the rotary tool again. Like a glove. And speaking of gloves, we're going to go ahead and swap this guy's out. The old one with the old bolter didn't have the correct firing grip, didn't have the bottom of the pistol grip, didn't have his finger extended. I think this is just going to look better overall. And after I pin this hand on, this kit bash is done. From here, it's time to go to the Cultists. I needed to decide how many I was going to have, and 3 just felt right. It's one of those natural numbers. I think it'll also give a nice balance to the final diorama. The original plan here was just to beat up on a bunch of nurglings, but at $35 a pop, I wasn't quite ready to do that when I had these guys laying around already. This spinning blade of death definitely looks way more dangerous than an X-Acto. Moving on to the base of the diorama, I need to buy some 3.5-inch floppy disks. I never thought I'd utter those words again. Well, that thing's working its way through the postal service. I'm going to go ahead and move over to planning my diorama. I'm just going to move some things around, sketch it out a bit, try and figure out what goes where and what feels right. After that, we can get to the fun part. We're moving over to the airbrush booth. I'm going to start with the Zenithal Prime, black on the bottom, white on the top. This is an awesome step because it really unifies everything I've put together, all those little bits. They all come together here. And while I've got that white out, I may as well hit the helmet, give it a little extra love. I'm not beyond taking shortcuts, and if this helmet's supposed to be white anyway, it would be just silly to skip this opportunity. After that, I'm going to lay down a nice base layer of this pearl krill blue. It may not be ultramarine blue, but it's one of my favorites. For the shadowing on this, I'm going to mix in just a little bit of red, a little bit of black, and that's going to give me a really nice blended shadow. I'm going for maximum contrast on this guy, and this is one of the steps I need to get there. The second part of that is to mix in a little bit of pearl krill blue and some white, and come in and do a highlight. For my straps, my purity seals, and anything that's going to get covered in gold later on, I'm going to come in and put down some golden brown. Moving on from there, we're going straight for some Abaddon. This is going into all the joints, and it's going to give a nice little visual break to the model and all that blue. Also, we'll throw some on the feet. Why not? For my bolt gun and my purity seals, I'm going to go with Bold Pyro Red. This is probably my favorite red. It's got really great coverage and really great color. From there, I went to Pro Acryl Silver. This is going to be the first metallic I'm using. It's going to go on the gun, it's going to go on the torso, a little bit on the backpack, and of course, chainsaw teeth. On the box art, he's got a pretty nice little Aquila dangly, but I don't have that, so I'm just going to freehand it. Now that we got all the base layers taken care of, it's time to move into the highlights, and the first ones are going to be on the joints. All this is a mix of white and black, nothing special. Then I'm going to come back, mix a little bit of white into my golden brown. I'll use that on the cloth and on the weapon sling. Then I'm going to go the other way, mix some black into my golden brown, and do a little bit of damage onto that sling. Make it look rough and worn. Give it that texture that you can feel just by looking at. Since I've already got some of that bold pyro red on my palette, I'm just going to go ahead and base my eyes. This is a great starting point for some future highlights. Now it's time to go cover up some of that brown we laid down with some rich gold. Having that brown base layer down gives me a nice rich color, good coverage, and helps unify that color a little bit. Even though I don't have the laurel on the helmet, I'm going to put a little drop of gold on there. From there, I'm stepping my gray up to a brighter value, and I'm going to put that back onto the sword hilt. Then, since I've got it out already, I may as well start my shoulder trim. This is going to be white eventually, but in order to not make it chalk up and to fight it, I'm just going to start here and build my way up to white. After that, I'm going to go ahead and grab some Nuln Oil. I'm pretty sure most of you already know about this, so I won't bore you by just jabbering on about it. If you don't know about it, go get yourself a pot. This stuff's great. The only thing I didn't put Nuln Oil on was the gold and the parchment. That's because I'm going to come back in with a little bit of Agrax Earthshade. I find the color to complement this much better than the Nuln Oil. Then once those are dry, I'm going to come back in with that original rich gold and re-highlight some of these flat panels. Going back over to that weapon sling and parchment, I'm going to add a little bit of white in and get another final highlight color on there. Then it's one more cleanup stage on the white for the trim, just to make sure I didn't mess anything up with that Nuln Oil. A little bit of pure black on the neck, then straight into the armor highlights. And depending on how you feel about edge highlights, this is either going to be your favorite zen moment of the day, or if you're like me, it's going to be a little bit of a mess. This is definitely not my strong suit, but I guess if I was a master of all this, I'd be pretty bored with it. So I'll just keep practicing. Every time I do this, I get a little bit better, and it becomes a little bit easier. For the highlight, I'm doing a 2-stage. I'm going to use a really light blue, and then just a pure white, just to accentuate some of the highlights. That wraps it up. Malum is complete. Time to get him assembled. In order to get around this, I'm going to have to modify the neck a little bit. It's just a sharp knife. It's fine, right? It's not a buzzsaw of death. As fun as Malum was to paint, and as wonderful as he turned out, it took a while. These cultists aren't going to get quite so grand a treatment. This is pretty much exactly what Citadel contrast colors are made for, so I would feel a little silly not to use them here. These paints are wonderful. If you haven't tried them before, I would highly recommend it. Either this, or grab yourself some speed paint. The colors lay down across cloth and organic stuff really nice. I probably wouldn't use it on the power armor for the Space Marines, but I know some people that do. It's just all in your approach. But for what I need for these raggedy cultists in their ragtag group, it's just about the perfect solution. All it takes is one pass of that color over a zenithal and you've got a great looking model. Later on I'll add just a touch of dry brush so you can see that, but honestly if you're just getting these on the table, you wouldn't even need that. In order to emphasize a couple areas on the models, I'm going to come back in with some silver. I've already got kind of like a cheap man's faux NMM going on here for the silvers, but bringing this paint in to punch up some of those areas is just going to make it read a lot better. Here's that dry brush I was talking about. I'm just using some ivory and coming back in doing top-down strokes just to catch the edges. Red cloak got away from me a little bit, but that's alright. It still looks pretty good. If I wanted to, I could have just washed it back, and that would have gotten rid of a lot of the excess dry brush that I had on there. Red cloak's going to go ahead and get a little touch of gold on him just to make it stand out and pop a little bit. The time you save using the contrast color, you can really reinvest in some of these little details. Moving back over to Malum for a minute because I decided he wasn't done, because I left his ultramarine emblem off, and what kind of self-respecting Space Marine veteran wouldn't want to show off his chapter? So in order to fix that oversight, I'm just going to push a little paint around, play with my blues and my whites, going back and forth until I've got the shape and the color that I'm looking for. There's a little back and forth, a little bit of fun, and it's done. In order to respect the Boltgun game and be a little bit accurate, I decided I needed some excessive gore, because that game's got it. So in order to show that, I'm going to cut some of this really thin plastic, make it into nice thin strips, and use that for the exit wounds from bolter rounds and from the slashes of the chainsword. I'm inserting these at semi-random angles, mostly expanding outwards from the body, in order to help out with the super secret sauce, Uhu glue. You want to just cram this stuff in there, just pack it in, push it into the body, and then pull it back along those strands. This is what's going to give you that nice visceral, chunky, bloody mess coming off the wound. Now that Malum and the cultists are done, I just need somewhere for these guys to fight. So I'm going to go ahead, grab my floppy disk, go over to the airbrush booth, and start laying down a little bit of color. I'll be starting it out with just a single coat of white primer, and then again that pearl krill blue. Once those colors have set really nicely, I'm going to go ahead and put my template on here, figure out where everything needs to be, and then I'm going to start cutting some cork out. The cork is really the best basic material I could get for this. I know some people don't like it, it's not like real rocks, but it's got the perfect 8 or 16-bit low poly graphic that I'm looking for. That nice chunky surface. Then it's time to grab my disc and start detailing it out. First up, the label with the Boltgun name on it. I thought about using an actual label, but honestly, I don't have any of those. Instead, all it took was a little bit of paint and some patience. But at this point of the project, I've kind of only got one of those things. Working on this disc was a blast. It really let me play around and just kind of pretend like I'm a 2D artist for a while. I don't do canvases, I'm not good at that kind of stuff. But this gave me the chance to play around, use a Sharpie, which I never get to do, and just have some fun. There's definitely a little bit of freedom when it's intentionally messy. For the cork, I went ahead and basted in Style Res Black, then I went ahead and did a bunch of dry brushes, working my way all the way up to white. Going back to the gore, the secret recipe is going to be just a little bit of black, little spots, mixed in with a bunch of blood for the blood god. That's going to give me a couple different values inside the red, some brighter and some darker. Back over at the cork, a little more edge highlight, a little bit more white, just to really punch that up. After that, one of the only things left was to actually do the label on here. It was a lot of fun. It felt like 2D art, you know, obviously because it is, but I haven't done that a lot. It was fun to play with the colors, push them around, see what happened. I may not be exactly Bob Rossing it up here, but I'm pretty sure there's some happy trees in here somewhere. It was a great excuse for me to just sit down, play around, try something I hadn't tried before. I probably could have saved myself somewhere in the ballpark of a third of the time that I spent on this if I had just gone ahead and planned it out a little bit better. I had to go back and put some browns and yellows over top of this horizontal black line. That's not great. Then I went back and re-washed everything to get it to that sepia tone, but that meant that I had to then come back in with the reds, work on the colors, then come back in with the blacks, reinforce those lines. Just a lot of duplication effort that didn't need to be there. Even though I made a lot of those mistakes, I really didn't mind because it was such a fun experiment to just get out there and try something new. But enough of the negatives, let's talk about this lettering. That Warhammer lettering came out crisp, and I really enjoyed it. So much so that I actually covered some of it up later. Once all the painting's done, it's time to get my cork bases on here, plan this out, figure out where these minis are going, and then figure out the model posing. What angles do I need, where the blade's going, where the bullet's going, and get these guys all glued down. The entire time I'm doing this, I'm looking at that reference. I've got that thing sitting just off to the right, and that kind of gives me a good idea where everything needs to go, and then I'll play with it from there. Once that's all dried up, I'm going to come back in with a little bit more Uhu glue, and use that to connect the chainsword to the cultist that was unfortunate enough to cross him. And then once that's dry, I'll just go ahead and slap some more blood for the blood god on there, mix it in, and make sure it looks like it's part of that initial wound that I made. I definitely enjoy playing Boltgun. but let me tell you, painting Boltgun is even better. At the end of the day, this project is something that I am wildly proud of. Is it perfect? Nope. Was it fun? Definitely. Does it look good? Probably. I think so. Overall, I just had a great time doing this. If you have any inclination to try something like this, I would say go do it. You may come back to painting armies and kill teams because it just wasn't for you, but it might just be that little spark of fun that you needed. Now go ahead and do those YouTube things, you know the YouTube things, and enjoy the rest of these 360s. I will see you guys in the next one.